Finally, hey everybody, how you doing? This is a late night classic talk show presentation of a sort around something that I wanted to do for quite a while now. I've been pushing it back days, in part because I've been silk and helping around here, and then of course we had San Diego Comic Con, and although I didn't actually go to San Diego this year, I managed to make some small cyber presence as befits the way I do my corporate digital work, and we do here at Zenny 62 Media Incorporated. So, anyway, I always thought this is the right time to talk about this. No, this is the right time. No, that's the right time. No, that's the right time. No. And I realized the times that I was picking on the West that were not friendly to the West Coast audience, because if I did it at 2 o'clock, that was 11 o'clock in the morning. On the other hand, if I waited too late, that's dinner time. I'm here helping my mom as her caregiver, and so she's really a stickler for having dinner at a certain time. And I remind you, you're never too old to not be your parents' sons and daughters. It's just the way it works. Okay. So, on the other hand, you are telling your kids, if you have some, I hope you do, that regardless of how old they get, you're never going to stop being their father or mother. So, you know, duty calls. Uh, but I really have a big issue with how a number of people who call themselves journalists have dealt with this matter of the Oakland Athletics work to move to Las Vegas. In Let me explain by a little bit of background regarding how I gather a ground level or groundwork of education and experience that led me to where I am here. And I'm not going to spend a long time on it, but I will say that my background's in, I've got a number of classes I took in drafting going all the way back to junior high school. Then in high school, I ship check naval vessels. You would say, what does all this have to do with baseball? Well, we're talking about ballparks and architecture and drawings, right? That sort of thing, engineering. And then in college, I was fortunate enough to score an internship with the planning department in Fort Worth and the zoning department doing little maps and stuff. And then I got another great one in Dallas, talking about the zoning in Dallas and a number of projects that I was involved in with a guy named Pia Pereira, who ironically enough knew B. Matsumoto from Skyline High School, where I went to school in Oakland, right? So that was my planning work. And then, of course, when it came to going to undergraduate school at Texas Arlington, I designed my own city planning major, which is heavily economics oriented and public finance. And had Joel Goldstein was our great department leader. And I had my sight set on coming back to Oakland through Cal, go to grad school. It was my dream. I was number one on the wait list for planning school and got in. And my statement of purpose was that, to be honest, the reason why I got all A's in planning and planning related courses and economics and all that was because, well, economics was a struggle, but I finally got there. But that's all I cared about. I didn't care about anything else. I was quite clear about that in my statement of purpose. Everyone loved it. And so Berkeley grad school was the best the best 2 school years of my entire life. I can't think of a better place to go for an undergrad student who's intellectually curious than Berkeley. It gives you the freedom to be that. So anyway, that turned into a after grad school. Well, actually, after undergraduate school, in grad school, then my first job was, of course, you heard me talking about the Oakland Redevelopment Agency, right? And then I went on from that point to internship within the agency, asked to do something I felt was not ethical. And then I wound up on something called the Alameda Base Reuse Committee. And because of the corruption that I saw while being on the Alameda Base Reuse Committee, which is a reuse committee put together because of the planned base closure, that's right, the Alameda bases and the West Oakland Army base, among the other bases in Hunters Point in the Bay Area, I wanted to write about it. And my friend of mine, Molly Egri, who worked for Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson, then said, well, hey, write what's called a query letter. And she showed me how to structure it and said, send one to the Montclarian and, excuse me, the Tribune, but don't stop there, send it to the Montclarian. The Tribune said, no, that was Pearl Stewart. She was actually, um, she actually was, she was actually was kind of, how do I put it? Uh, she was scared to talk to me. I'm not kidding. She was scared to talk to me. And so I think Jay's pointed out these lights are further. I think it has something to do with my glasses. I think it's like that. I don't know what it is. Or I think it's the fact that I'm using, you know what it is? I'm using this high def camera and it's going in and out. It's a Logitech camera. And I think what I'm going to do is, as I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a mid course change. Okay. And the mid-course change I'm making is I thought the sound would be better because of that, but that flicker, if that flicker is annoying you all, what I'm going to do is disconnect it. And I'm actually going to, if I can do this, never done this before. Okay, hold on a second. Uh, okay, and I think that might be better. And you can hear me now, right? All right, that's better, right? So now we're back. Okay. So it's not as bright and everything, but you don't get the flickering or anything else. You get what you see here. It's more uh it doesn't filter out the tungsten. Okay. So whatever's going on, this is better. So I just leave it right here. But at any rate, sorry about the flickering and everything, folks. I was trying this new camera right here, which is at the top. All right, this one. Okay, Logitech. And obviously Logitech was not logical to use. Ta-da. So anyway, as I was saying, that's where I learned this crucible within which to learn the craft of writing and all of that. And I had column and because it was the first time the Montclarian had an African American as a lead columnist. And I was talking about Oakland's economy and I was breaking stories. My column became as popular as that one by the now late Peggy Stinnett. Peggy and I became friends. And that was really the start of my foray into media. And so it was different then. There was no internet. Okay. This was 1993 and then to 1996. And during that path, we got to a point where we started uploading via email, but that came in 95. And what happened was that we were doing everything in a way that you don't even see anymore today. At one point, we used to just, type them in the office and everything and submit them in and they go to the press and all that stuff. But what was dramatically different then than now is how people who were journalists worked. If you were an expert in a subject area, what we now call a subject matter expert, you got that call and you got quoted. And they had a list of people in what CNN used to call the Red Book and started was still called the Red Book through the 21st century, probably still do now, of people in different areas they call on to get comments. But you didn't see them calling on exclusively the words of another journalist to pretend to be the person that was the subject matter expert. All right. That was not done. So I just logically by example. I assumed it was just a no-no to do that. Well, fast forward today, and we have people like Ken Rosenthal, who wrote this piece for the Atlantic, doing that. He's not the only one. Journalists are not experts on baseball stadium finance, unless, of course, they happen to have a background in architecture or public finance, and they don't. Yet, what they do and what they continue to do, that it screws up the reporting on the Oakland Athletics situation in Oakland, let alone their process of moving to Las Vegas, is that they introduce and turn to other news people and quote them and their ideas and observations, sometimes from an unnamed source, which could very well be their significant other. You don't know. I'm not kidding. And so this has gone on to the point where it's the norm. It is the norm. And it happens to be a norm. This is Rosenthal's piece in The Athletic, and I hate paywalls, so I don't pay to read this. But my point is that I'm going to go to that in a second. My point is that Ken Rosenthal is one of those people. And so how the heck can he expect to actually explain to you what the athletic situation is if he doesn't turn to, if you're going to say Zinni, me, as a person who worked in government, right? As a person who worked for a time against then marketing representative Andy Dolich when I worked for Oakland Mayor Harley Harris. I wasn't really against Andy, but the Athletics were trying to escape on some electricity payments, and it was left to me to settle the issue with them. That's the place Ellie put me in. At any rate, and if it's not me, then look at the people I've had on. Like, for example, when I wanted to learn about how the Las Vegas ballpark bonds were structured, who did I have on? But Guy Hobbs, the man who actually designed the bond issue, which makes me the only person in this group of media people who actually calls on subject matter experts to have on as guests. Okay. And I believe it gives you a richer conversation, a richer tapestry of information. Not only that, the person actually did it, so they know what they're talking about. You're not getting the word of a person who calls themselves a journalist, who is influenced by their editors, who in turn are influenced by their publishers, who in turn are influenced by their investors. This happens whether it's a for-profit news organization, and it really happens if it's a nonprofit news organization, which really counts on checks to write off, and they always serve at the pleasure of their check masters. That is a fact, more so than their for-profit counterparts. That's especially true in Oakland, okay, and the Bay Area. So in all of this, what they do is they pander to the fans. Why? Because in the internet age, they want to make sure that they're getting views. They want to make sure that they're on the right side of where the wind is blowing, so that those views are translated into money. Views are clicks, wind up being clicks on ads. Views on ads are what we call impressions. And all of that is monetized, so that at the end of the day, the person that is posting the ad is forced to write a check. That's the reality. That is the news reality. It's the same reality for the now really small reach of television compared to what it used to be, because of the internet is in a lot of cases overtaken television, so that you might be watching, and this is just a fact, folks, you might be watching any of the news channels in the Bay Area, and you think you and others and millions out there all right, are seeing the broadcast. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's actually a few thousand. And when you actually look at the numbers compared to, say, for example, their Chinese or Latino counterparts like Univision, you'll find that their numbers are actually greater. That's right. Their numbers are actually larger. Okay? So what it means is we have this desert, okay? This desert out there of real factual information going on, and there's this attempt via social media to develop parts of that desert with what the person thinks is the right information, but really is their prejudice. In other words, hey, if you love the idea that the Athletics are going to build at Howard Terminal, then public money is a-okay with you. Why? Because you never opposed what the Athletics are trying to do with respect to having government assistance in Oakland. But because you don't like that they're trying to move to Las Vegas, all of a sudden you oppose it for Las Vegas. That's hypocrisy. All right. That's hypocrisy. Or then, if you've been in baseball a long time, you've written like Ken Rosenthal has, you all of a sudden post this, with a questionable article that says the A's are getting a free pass for being a train wreck. And he asks, how does that make sense? And then you appear on YouTube channels, not mine, where you basically spend much of your time admitting that you don't know what's going on with the Oakland A's and why they made the decision that they made. But you feel great because you talked to Oakland Mayor Shang Tao, who just got there, was council member, and by her own admission last year, really wasn't in on the deal team to make any of the decisions regarding what was happening with the Athletics. Okay. And that is a fact. And so here we are. And on top of that, Shang was, what I think the best term is congregating and entertaining the company of political opponents to Howard Terminal. In fact, when she had made an appearance with the African American Sports and Entertainment Group to celebrate their taking control officially of the Coliseum portion, or their portion of the Coliseum alongside the Oakland Athletics, all the elected officials that joined with her were people who were opposed to Howard Terminal to some degree. And I looked at that display and I said then on my live stream that if Ray Bobbitt and his people and the people backing Shang Tao and Shang Tao and the mayor herself think that the Athletics aren't seeing this and going, oh my God, what are they doing? They're in for a surprise. That was before the Athletics walked away. Because before. Now here Ken is saying, and this is unbelievable, that he would basically write that the A's are getting a free pass to Vegas for being a train wreck. But I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say this again, I'm going to take Ken's piece down, and I'm just talk, and I'm going to deal with your comments, just like this is talk radio, okay, without any props. But my point is that, first of all, anyone who's paid attention, even half attention to the athletic situation over the years, knows that their revenue potential compared to their competitors, and I've talked about this before for those who pay attention, and it's still out there if you want to pay attention, sometimes you haven't before, is that if you don't own the stadium, or if you don't own all the revenue the stadium produces, and yet your counterparts with the Yankees and the Mets, and look at all the ballparks around, and the vast majority of them are not in multi-purpose stadium situations where they're sharing the stadium with a football organization, which also requires a great deal of money to run it. So what does that mean? It means that what they seek is what, for example, the Yankees and the Mets have. The Yankees and Mets respectively control the revenue in their ballparks, that comes to them. They get tax break. They get this because of the enormous amount of money it takes to field a competitive team. Why? Because of the fact that baseball salaries have went up from 2003 to today 123%. So you can't be in the same situation and charge more to advertisers, and yet you still have the same slice, that little slice of the total pie in the stadium that the Athletics enjoy. In other words, they only get money when their games are, played, and the advertisements there are not all owned in terms of the revenue generation by the Athletics. That's the current situation. That was also true for the Warriors, which is why they wanted out. That was also true for the Raiders. Okay. And so the big culprit is the fact that you are paying athletes a lot of money to be professionals. It doesn't matter the sport. And so because of that, you can't field effectively a high performance ball team. And I say ball team in any sport if you're in a situation where your competitors' average salaries are wildly outpacing your own. That's the athletic situation. Above anything else, that has been the biggest problem. So, what they sought originally was Howard Terminal because the belief was that, hey, look, because of its location, we can make more money there and own it because of it would be an iconic location. They'll be able to look out over the waters of the bay and right to Oracle Park. You could go over to Oracle Park, go over to the first base line, third deck, get over to the outfield there in your seats, and you would see right into the basin, right to Howard Terminal. Imagine, and I've said this before, and anybody who would think about it, imagine if the Athletics had a ballpark there. All right. Well, so did they. And not only that, because of that location on the water of one of the most photographed areas, urban areas in the entire world, the San Francisco Bay Area, for obvious reasons, Bay Bridge, East Bay span of the bridge, which was rebuilt anew, all the other reasons for uh, that make this a fantastic area, tourist attraction, right? So here's something new to look at: Howard Terminal, and this glistening, originally what was to be a jewel box design. The idea was perfect, and what would it have captured aside from just visitors? Sponsorship money, which gets to my other point. The Athletics, either in Las Vegas or in Oakland at Howard Terminal, were set to realize a dramatically healthy improvement in their income because the situation that they're in the Cotton Coliseum does not allow them to field a competitive team. Now, I know you're going to talk to me about Moneyball, and I'm glad you raised it because Moneyball was back in the early part of the 21st century. And again, what happened during that time from the early part of the 21st century till now? Well, salaries nearly doubled. 100, I know 128% is not nearly, but yeah, well, it is. 100% is one over and then a little bit more. So basically, it is a doubling. That's what happened. And you have a situation where the Mets, I believe last year, had a net payroll of, depending on how you estimate it, 260 to 300 million versus the A's at what, 60 million? All right. You cannot field a competitive team. So for Ken Rosenthal to ask the question, I mean, this is a ridiculous question. How are the A's getting a free pass for being a train wreck? They're a train wreck because they are in the worst revenue situation of any stadium or ballpark among the majors: football, baseball, basketball, hockey in the United States, and basketball in the United States. That's why. So you have to cut corners. You have to shed players that normally you would like to be able to afford. Because what's happening is that the salaries, particularly after the pandemic, started increasing. And here you are, you're comparatively flatlining in terms of your revenue needed to be competitive. That's unsustainable. And you can't have a situation where salaries are increasing, yes, in fits and starts, but basically still going up. And the athletics revenue is not able, because of primarily stadium structure and the piece of the pie that the athletics have of it or own of it, you can't expect the athletics to keep pace with that. It is simply unreasonable. It's something's got to give. And so that's why, and I might add, the pandemic made that situation even worse because folks were getting, laid off. In worst cases, they were losing their lives. The world, not just the United States, but the world was damaged economically and socially by the pandemic. And the popular saying now is, you know what? Every time we look at something that's related to the pandemic, its impact, it is something that we said was going to happen, but the pandemic forced it to happen faster. How many times have you heard that? And that's what's happened. All these problems have been, in a sense, foreshortened and collectively plopped into our lap. And the Lord says, deal with it because the devil is doing this to you. All right. And so, all right. And so here's the thing. I'm going to say something that I want to make clear. Mark Thompson just wrote something I want to respond to. He says, I think that the A's had to move to Vegas. Otherwise, they would go out of business and not be a Major League Baseball team that would be exist anymore. Here's my point. If the city of Oakland, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, but it's true. If the city of Oakland had acted with the necessary urgency and given credibility, certainty, and capacity to back the work that the city of Oakland did legislatively in working with the athletics to get SB 293 Skinner passed so they would have access to tax increment financing money, and they had that buttoned up by 2020, which is doable, we wouldn't be talking about this. Now, for those of you who say, well, Zinni, it was the pandemic, I say, no, it wasn't, because they can meet on Zoom. The problem was, and as Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf admitted to me, on the 20th of July of 2021 in our post city council meeting regarding the term sheet with this, on the athletics, she admitted to me that they simply were in a situation where they weren't familiar with redevelopment anymore. And I'm paraphrasing, but she said that the traditional tools of redevelopment are not available to us. And that wasn't true. Because and she said this in 2021, because the traditional tools of redevelopment were and have been tax increment financing. But what she was trying to say is because we hadn't used them in a long time, that we didn't have the expertise. And here they were actually hired consultants that were supposed to have the expertise, but really made a ton of mistakes. Now I'm talking about Century Urban and the god awful tax increment financing supposedly report that they created. And the city didn't fire them and hire somebody else, which has to point to the expense that was made and the city's lack of desire in correcting the error of dealing with that consultancy, let alone getting a second opinion. They could have hired me. I was already out there blasting them. And what Century Urban did was they said, well, hey, city, you had the old redevelopment project area. Because of that, you have to finish paying off that bond first. And here's what their thinking was, okay? Here's why it's wrong. And so what they did was they took out and curtailed the redevelopment area in such a way that it was only 19 years and not 45 years in length, which means instead of spending 45 years taking in tax increment revenue, right, to pay off your bond issue, they're only taking 19, which means your bond issue is smaller. What they could have done is said, hey, wait a minute, that's old law, because it was. And the new law doesn't prohibit us from actually raising money to pay off the bond debt remaining. Folks, the bond debt remaining downtown is only 53 million, just north of 53 million dollars. So you're going out there and you're designing a bond issue that, assuming you have a $2 billion base year assessed value, just that's it. Okay, that's the ballpark. All right, plus an event center, assuming and a little bit and a few other developments. But let's say you're targeting, as I advocate, targeting assessed value. You target 2 billion because you know that at 4% rate of growth in assessed value over a 45-year period under that 2 billion in assessed value with tax increment financing, and you know the calculation. Basically, you start the base year of assessed value. In the second year, you subtract the second year of assessed value from the base year. That's your first year, and you multiply that times your tax rate, and then boom, there's your revenue. You keep doing that for 45 years, right? My point is that you know that when you do that process, it gets you $1,600,000,000. All right. You take half of that, you say, I will bond off this 800 million. And so here comes Dave Cobble, chortling, hey, look, we're going to build 12 billion on this property. Now, the reality is that he didn't mean 12 billion at once. It was phased, starting with the ballpark. And that's where Ken Rosenthal misses it. He makes the mistake in The Athletic of coughing that up. So does Tim Kawakami and a number of these people who want you to believe that they're journalists. They don't check themselves. They quote each other. All right. So what happens when you take garbage and you just simply toss it down the street? It makes the street dirty. The garbage is the information they're putting out. The part that they're making dirty, the street, is the landscape of conversation around this that you and I have been involved in. And it's got to stop. So, and it's not a matter of which side you're on, it's a matter of understanding the right information to make the right decision, to understand what's going on. So that if you understand that what Oakland did was first work with the A's and say, we will set up a tax increment financing zone for you so that we can subsidize construction of your infrastructure, your sea level rise platform, and help pay for community benefits and offsite infrastructure. 800 million applies, it gets a lot of money. All right. All right. And then that leaves you to take in athletics, to take in care of the private financing side where you pay for your ballpark. That was the idea. So then imagine what you would think. I mean, think about this. What would you think if you were in a situation where someone promised that they would finance your home like that? And a great deal. And then all of a sudden, during the years in working on negotiating or the mortgage, because it's a big house, they suddenly take that away from you. First, they say they're going to do it. Then they seemingly never set a date to have the tax increment revenue produced. They don't design the enhanced infrastructure financing district zone. They don't do anything. And then they get in these arguments with people who don't know in the media, and they say, oh, well, it's because of the shape of the map. No, it isn't, which proved they didn't know what they were doing. Because as I've said to you or anybody else, if you have a map that's, let's say, 500 acres or 50 acres, and it has like Howard Terminal, and yet it has a projected $1 billion of construction on it, that's more valuable than a map that's 500 acres and has nothing on it. So it's not the size of the map. Again, it's not the size of the map, it's assessed value. But when you put a subject like building a stadium, mixing it with tax increment financing and other seemingly esoteric subheading subjects, and throw it into the lap of a lay person, a lay reporter who doesn't have either the intellectual courage or time to find a subject matter expert, and then starts just sort of, digging things up, or doesn't know how to use the internet to do the proper research because it's all there, which is the other problem. Then you get the dramatic errors that I'm talking about. And that all of that falls into how these journalists work with elected officials who also don't know. Because you don't have the city of Oakland putting out its project manager. The one time they did put out Ms. Mayburn, it was a disaster. She made a ton of mistakes in presentation and facts. When you, as a city, are tasked with saying to the public, trust us, we will build for the athletics and with the athletics a facility that is designed such that it pays off its bonds. And you already have the history of the Raiders deal behind you, even though people don't like to talk about the fact that the Warriors arena didn't have a financing problem. Why? Because it worked. And something working in Oakland isn't something that just makes headlines. It should. It should. But that also should not stop Oakland. And yet what happened was the politicians who had no idea, who knew what we did in the past and didn't ask, all right, didn't ask me, all right, didn't ask anybody. And the people they could have asked, a lot of them have passed on. All right, that's the other tragedy about it. They passed on. Think about it. You have people who've done tax increment financing before at a high level in Oakland who passed away without ever having the luxury of being in a room to explain how that's done. Now, on the management side, you have somebody like Lamont Mule, right, who's still contributing in a positive way to helping the city run its, for example, search for a city manager. But that's about it. That's about it. The new council members and the staffers don't understand. And yet they don't want to pretend like they need help, even pretend like it, let alone really admit it. And yet the city pushes them out there. And these are not the people who've done it before. Libby did it with Claudia Capio, who was her assistant city administrator in charge of the Raiders. One NFL official told me that she was very nice, but it was clear she needed to get up to speed on a number of things. Okay? It was true. Claudia left Ronnie Lott, the head of the Lott Group, who was to develop the stadium for the Raiders in Oakland, the competing proposal where he joined with Forest Investments, and was waiting for drawings from Claudia. I happened to run into her in front of City Hall mayor's office, asked her if she got Mr. Lott his drawings. She hadn't gotten him the drawings, not the drawings, I'm sorry, the spreadsheet calculations that he needed, in which I offered to do in a heartbeat. Didn't even take me up on the offer. Just to get things going. All right? Just to get things going, to keep him from waiting. So she was willing to let her own combination of lack of knowledge and scheduling hold up a key part of the financing regarding a stadium for the Raiders in Oakland. You hearing what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying? Okay. So don't anyone tell me that coming back to the A's, it was the pandemic that stopped the formation of the enhanced infrastructure financing district. The city simply believed it couldn't do it. And then when they took a look at the money that it would generate, they really didn't want to do it. Oakland is allergic to producing enough money to solve its economic development problems. It's not allergic to producing enough money to pay, for example, its police officers. It's not allergic to paying, having enough money to pay the executives who desire those salaries, but it is allergic to paying its people at the lower end who are working at less than the minimum wage levels. And this is the city of Oakland. In the days when I was working for the city, we used tax increment financing to fill that labor gap. That's what we did. And that's what I was going to explain to candidate and city council member Shang Tao when we were meeting, and we a meeting she asked for on the 2nd of February of last year, but she wanted to make it secret. And then gave me homework, but she didn't want to hire me as a consultant. And then some of you are out there and mad that I said that. That's crazy. You're going to do something for free. I would bet the whole of you out there have watched Mad Men, the show that made John Hamm famous, playing the legendary advertising exec Don Draper. Well, I remember an episode where he had a meeting with Conrad Hilton. Yes, the Conrad Hilton. And Connie, as he called him, had asked Don to do something that Don had said while lighting up a cigarette. Well, Connie, that's my profession. In other words, I don't work for free. That was my profession. Even though I offered to work for free to help the project along, in the Raiders case, I wasn't about to do it for the person running for mayor at all. I wanted her to hire me. I wanted to make made public so that people could understand the importance that we get a enhanced infrastructure financing district or series of districts done. Folks, in the 8 years that this legislation has been around, the city has used tax increment financing a grand total of times. 0. Even though it has been adjusted so it could be used to do, among other things, help businesses, perhaps like yours in Oakland, get assistance to recover from the pandemic. You understand what I'm saying? You understand? So, back to the main point. You're the athletics, and you really don't understand redevelopment. In fact, you, in the face of Oakland Athletics President Dave Cobble, told me on the 4th of April, 2017, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when I said that he needed to build affordable housing if he wanted to get Howard Terminal passed, and he needed to use tax increment financing. Oh, Dave Cobble said public money isn't available. He didn't know about the legislation. I told him about it. The father of all enhanced infrastructure financing district legislation, SB 628 bill. And then the media got that wrong too. because San Francisco Chronicle had one article where instead of referring to the law, and I want you to pay attention to this, okay, folks, because this is the height of stupidity, and I'm saying it just like that. I'm sorry, but this is not something you slough off. You know, it's something you work to get right. All right. They had one of their reporters, who I believe was a one and done, right, that Howard Terminal was using not an enhanced infrastructure financing district, but an infrastructure financing district, an IFD. There's a big difference, folks. It says it right there in the law. Why is it called enhanced? Because it used tax increment financing. There are a lot of people who play games with the nomenclature. Tax increment financing is only tax increment financing if it uses this formula: base year assessed value, current year assessed value is the next year. You take that next year, that current year assessed value, subtract the base year, the difference is the increment. You multiply the increment times the rate. That's your first year of tax increment revenue, and so on, going up to as much as 45 years for your bond issue. If it's not doing that, if it's not using that, it's not tax increment financing. Yeah. Then you want to call it um, infrastructure development financing. Okay, fine, but it's not enhanced. It's not using tax increment. It's not using that model. Why is that model so special? Because it's a doubling calculation. It's a doubling formula. That's why they get you a lot of money at the back end. Whereas standard industrial development financing says, okay, I'm going to take your tax dollars and I'm going to add them up each year singularly. All right. And it's just that this is taking the revenue. It's not doing a calculation and basing its take off that. It's taking the revenue. All right. It's taking the generally takes the sales tax revenue. I have yet to see a IFD, infrastructure and development financing, IDF, excuse me, I keep saying IFD, infrastructure development financing system that uses property tax in that way. If it uses property taxes, commonly tax increment is the calculation. But point I'm making is that the Chronicle referred to the Oakland example as simple development, industrial development financing. And it says, oh, these zones, and it says, oh, these things are done all over the. Then it went off, this article that was written, this sloppy one, off on this blankety blank tangent saying, well, this is used around the United States. It's all over the place and it has mixed results. When you start with garbage in, what do you get, folks? You get garbage out. There's been a lot of garbage in by journalists who don't understand what they're looking at or how to think about it or the proper technical terminology. And so it becomes garbage out. There has been a lot of garbage out. A lot of it. So what are you going to do when you're the Athletics and you don't have your tax increment zone? And yet the city all of a sudden then turns around and its elected officials are saying, we want you to pay for outright affordable housing, not the subsidy. Oh, no, 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 no. We want you to pay for the whole thing. It's a big difference, folks. Classically, we've always paid the subsidy. It's called gap financing. But oh, no, 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 no. You have people in the council who want to soak you because they think that you're rich. Folks, let me tell you something. No billionaire in the history of sports has ever built a stadium with their own money. If you believe that, you're a fool. That's basically saying that you think that person is out there printing money and therefore they're going to do that, as opposed to the reality, which, hey, they have money to lose. people don't stay billionaires forever in every case. You shouldn't think of it that way. You always have to think about the matters of ballparks as building a machine, listen to me, that prints money. That's what I said. How many different revenue sources am I producing in the ballpark that can then be used in a private example to pay off a privately financed bond issue? Or let's say in the Atlanta Braves case, Liberty Media is spinning us off and we're gone public. Hey, that's fantastic. That means that we are taking our revenues and we're pledging them to the issuance of stock. And hey, if the earnings per share is attractive, you get more people buying the stock and the Braves become that much wealthier. Not bad. The future of sports? I think so. I think it's a necessary one. It's even better than gambling, which gets me back to why the Athletics are moving to Las Vegas. You can't do sports gambling in California. The legislature has not passed it. The people haven't allowed it in the ways that it's presented. So, how many years? Let me ask you, how many years do you expect the Athletics to hang around for that? Or any other organization, including the Warriors? At what point, when you look at the sports landscape when and how it's changing, do any of these organizations say, okay, you know what, enough's enough? California is not allowing us to have sports gambling, and so we're out of here. What's the replacement? I offer the stock market. But will they, as to whether or not they'll do it is another question. I would like to think that they should. I would like to think that Oakland has an economic development department that's intelligent enough to look at that situation and say, this is our ticket to helping to rebuild our sports team base yet again and really get another chance to do sports economic development right after not doing it at all for its entire history. Okay. So I got Ken Rosenthal telling me that the A's shouldn't be going to Las Vegas because, oh, by the way, the city didn't promise the Rose Garden or tax increment financing that was to present. So Ken Rosenthal gets fooled by Shang and her quartet. Thinks that they can get it done, Ken Rosenthal does. Well, their drawings look good to me, he says. He has no idea what he's looking at. They're drawings. They're not even final construction drawings. They're not even the ones that they really intend to build. And then he says, you know why I say that? Because the Athletics never gave the city completed drawings. That's why. Which was something I pointed out to when I originally got on the A's in 2021 for not handling this right. They were not doing, they were doing the city dirty in holding up the matter of completing the drawings. But from the A's perspective, they believed the city was slow rolling them and they weren't getting their tax increment revenue. Okay? Two wrongs don't make a right, folks. Two wrongs don't make a right. At all. At all. And then on top of all of that, the Athletics said how many times we're on parallel paths. They made it quite clear that if the city didn't get its act together, they were out. And that should have been clear to anyone paying attention. But a lot of you didn't believe it. I did, because I lived it. That behavior by the city affected me going all the way back to my own Super Bowl work, folks. Yeah, all the way back to 1999. It is a way that Oakland has only gotten worse, not better. And strong mayor made it so that the politician wants to get their face out there on what they believe is something you watch television, as opposed to, small screen. And so they want to say, hey, all right, it's my idea. It's my idea. Look at how Oakland council members treated Mayor Schaaf. As one of them said, hey, to me, your god sister, this is how this person will put it. Howard Terminal, that's her project. Okay. This is a major council member. In other words, it's not his project. It's not our project. It's her project. No, it wasn't the city administrator's project. It wasn't even the economic development director's project. And by the way, where is the economic development director in Oakland? Invisible to the public eye. That's not the way you run a city. Everyone should know who their public officials are. The politicians are the ones that should not be pulling the strings. Why? It's called the big C word, corruption. You have politicians who are looking for a handout to get reelected so they can, get to run their campaigns, right? So they can get reelected. And you're going to put them front and center as the persons that put out the public face in dealing with the developer. No. But that's what Oakland does. And it's so bad that during the Raiders case, I had a guy named Tariq Hassan call me out of the blue, bugging the blankety blank out of me. Get me in to see Libby. You're Libby's god brother. I said, look, Libby is my friend. We are not blood relatives. Okay. And I said, okay. I said, what do you think that I am? And then I told him, I said, look, you call me, it seems like every other day, you call me a lot. Think you then get you in to see Libby, even though I say no. You keep asking me, I say no. I said, I'm going to make you famous. I'm going to broadcast this if you don't knock it off. Why? Because I'm black. This is how some people in Oakland roll. They think if you're black and you are a politico, that you have to be, paid by somebody, which masks the fact that they really are paid by somebody. Okay. All right. It's like the pot calling the kettle black, or that other saying that everybody that people look at, they think really looks like they are, but they don't want to admit that they are. Okay. I introduced Tariq Hassan. All right. Then there was another fellow that had this idea for using real estate transfer tax to finance stadium construction. The trouble is he had never done the math. And I remember telling him, I said, you know what? So he partnered with a friend of mine. We had a great Stadium 360 architecture idea for the athletics. I have a video with him. But he said, I said, you know what? If you do the math regarding the amount of money you're going to take in for real estate transfer tax, it doesn't pin out. It doesn't add up. So what got me, he and I had it wasn't so much that we had a knockdown, drag out, anything like that. I talked to him in a way that, I'm sorry I did, but I was really pissed off with him because I took my time and I said, you know what? Send me your spreadsheet. Let me see what you got. Do you know what this guy did? He sent to me a term sheet, not a spreadsheet. I said, I don't see any numbers here. I don't see your estimates for construction costs per square foot. I don't see your net operating income. I don't see your income areas, your revenue areas. Nothing. It was a term sheet. And at that, you know what it was? It was a developer term sheet that they quite literally picked off the internet and was and thought that I was such a fool that I would believe it. See, there are only two ways to go there. Either he thought that I was such a fool to believe it, or worse, he didn't even know he was sending me. When I first pointed out to him, he said, "Oh, my secretary sent that. I'll take a look at it." And then he went defensive on the whole thing. And I told my friend, I said, "That guy's an FBI plant. All right. You're black. He's teamed with you. He thinks you can snow you into getting into the situation to find out how certain politicians behave and all that when they're not doing anything wrong at all." I told, and I'll say this, I'll tell Oakland Council member Larry Reed, I told him, "Hey, watch out for this guy." I told him about Tariq Hassan. He said, "Tariq's okay." I said, "I don't trust him, Larry. I don't." All right. Because I told them, and I've said it then, I'm saying it now and again. That behavior of trying to entrap black people involved in and of itself is criminal. All right. It's criminal. And it seems like there are people who look and they think if somebody was black and involved as an elected official or a public official, oh, they're automatically bad. Not so. There are a lot of very above board public officials. Henry Gardner, our great former city manager, now the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum Joint Powers Authority executive director, foremost among them. So it was an insult to our system to have to go through that crap. And I'm glad that I stomped it out. So that now is replaced by the latest idiocy contributed by our so called journalism community, which ought to be collectively flogged for how it has handled this situation. Okay. So my point is that the Athletics had enough of this because Major League Baseball Commissioner Bob Manfred had had enough. Remember, Manfred made the call. Manfred is the commissioner of baseball. He also remember when during Bud Selig's reign, and perhaps you do, the A's were this close to being contracted, folks, for the same set of reasons I'm telling you about. Not enough revenue in the Coliseum to field a competitive team on a consistent basis. Okay. All right. So I'll take these comments and then I'll be that. Ken Rosenthal, if you really want to learn something, and I'm saying it just like that, if you think I'm arrogant, I don't care. This is my wheelhouse. You want to learn something? Come on my program. Forget talking to other journalists because collectively your behavior is not that of journalists. And I'm not a journalist, and I'm saying that I'm a blogger, okay? But your collective behavior is disgusting. It would be nice if it stopped. Mark says, all comes down to money and everything else in life, it seems. Yep. It's business. Baseball and all sports is a business. Mark says, I think the A's had to move to Vegas. I got that one. Jay says, Oakland politicians, most of them don't realize that there is no one in the world I don't get that one. Go after the Arizona Coyotes. Great idea. He says, Unless I missed it, I have not seen one Bay Area news outlet congratulate the mayor on a newly approved pay raise. That's another story. I'm not dealing with that here. All right. So tomorrow we will have as my guest. I'm really excited to have her on yet again on the program. She is an Oakland psychotherapist. No, she's not psycho. She is um she is a great person. I really am glad I had her on before and it was a lot of fun. I'm excited to please this punch that she's gonna come back and talk um about this matter of how the pandemic um, has impacted our psychology, and so join me at 2 o'clock Pacific or 5 o'clock. She's back on the Zinni show tomorrow, and Dylan Belden. And so I'm really again excited to have her on. It's going to be a ton of fun to have her on to talk about how we've been impacted psychologically by the pandemic. And then I want to talk more. I think I might do a quick video about this. You ever see when Dave Cobble got on the Southwest plane? I think it was like last week or something like that. And all the A's fans on Twitter were making fun of him. Well, no one ever bothered to ask where he was going, right? I'm going to speculate on that one just for a quick moment. All right, so I'll see you all later, and thank you for watching. That ends this broadcast. Please, if you haven't done so before, subscribe to Zinni62 on YouTube. Bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com. And at the end of this week, a new website is coming. It will be the 5th WordPress style website in the arsenal created by Zinni62 Media. I'll give away the name later. That ends this broadcast. I'll see you. Thanks.